one thing I do on my strategies, any wellbeing strategies that I do not do them as a year plan ahead because everything can change month to month. Yeah. So I do them very real time. So that means you have to touch base with your team in real time, which means that you know what's going on pretty regularly. And if you take the time out to do that.
Hello and welcome to the Plumm Pod, where we talk about all things HR and mental health. I'm your host, Georgia, and founder of Access HR. On today's episode, we are joined by Kirsty Birch, and we talk about mental health. This is a real conversation, and from Kirsty's background as a wellbeing and mental health expert, she gives us such amazing, valuable advice. So whether you are a seasoned HR professional or you are new into the space, you definitely don't want to miss out on this episode. And before we get to it, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe to this podcast because the impact when you do this is huge. I could talk about it all day. Hi, Kirsty.
Thank you very much for having me here today. I'm excited to see you.
I am so excited. This conversation is so long overdue. And to our listeners, Kirsty and I don't really know what's happened. We've just kind of like missed paths, missed each other along the way. But thankfully today, you are here in the studio in London. And if anybody doesn't follow Kirsty on LinkedIn, we are going to talk about her main topic today, which is mental health. So Kirsty, for our listeners, I would love if you could paint a picture for us about you and your background. And a question that I love to ask every guest is, was HR part of the plan or did you fall into it by chance?
Well, firstly, definitely not part of the plan. I'm a qualified accountant. I did that for 20 plus years, so it definitely wasn't part of the plan. I should have been in this space a long time ago and I just wasn't. However, the skill sets I now bring over are actually, they really helped me in this space. So yeah, I think I just see it from I think you're a different age, different experiences, and you can give back in a different way. And this is what's brought me over here now. I'm very purpose-driven, George, if that's what I can say. Purpose-driven, fueled by a lot of passion, gave up a lot to be in this space, and I'm on a mission.
What inspired you to move into the mental health space?
My background, to be fair, I come from... Especially as a younger child, I had a lot of sort of childhood trauma, a lot of adversity going on. And I always knew that I wanted to give back in some way as I got into sort of my career path. And I had my young daughter when I was 17. So it was like, I need a stable job. I need something that's going to provide. So I went into accountancy, not really enjoyed it. I'm not going to lie, at the time. It was more, it gives me a good income. Mm-hmm. Lots of opportunities from it. I got a lot of, I've invested into companies. I've done very well out of it. And I'm very grateful for the position it's put me in. And I think as I've just got a bit older, I felt like something was missing. I felt like this is just not really where I want to go with this. Soon as I started getting into this space now, it was like, should have done this a long time ago. And and I get to work with people. And I think in environments where I know I can do a lot of good. So I think that's just what keeps me going. That's my fuel at the moment.
And I love that. I think a lot of us in the space as well, we do like to give back. We have really good intentions, really purposeful intentions. What was the point that you thought, okay, I'm now going to make this switch from accountancy into the mental health space. This is true to who I am. What was that tipping point?
Probably the same as what a lot of people said. I think COVID really tipped me on a different way. It made me realise then that, one, I couldn't really rely on a lot of the work that I was getting. I think it just highlighted that. And second of all, I thought, well, if I'm doing this now and I've made these sacrifices and I've taken a drop in my income to a degree, maybe it's time I started looking at something different. And then as soon as I went down this space and started getting a bit more training and get a bit more involved in it was a no-brainer. Like I literally walked away from all of my clients. I lost a lot of money income each year. But it was like, do you know what? Every time I seem to speak to someone or like yourself, we're doing something like this, it just makes me realise that, do you know what? This is where I'm meant to be. And I do it very differently to other people as well. And this is, I think, what spurred me on more is there is no one else doing what I do in my space, as bold as I am, with my skill set as well, that can actually make an impact there. So I think looking at the whole bigger picture, it was just time. And I hit 40, mate, this year. And I think that just made it cemented that you're on the right path and you're doing the right thing. So yeah, the last, I'd say 3 years, 3-4 years has really pivoted my journey, but in a positive way.
Nice. And equally, if we don't take any risks, it minimises the reward. And quite clearly, the risk that you took is absolutely paid off. You're absolutely right. And that's also why I was so interested for us to have this conversation and keep it going, because what you're doing in the space is really bold. You're talking about mental health with your accountancy head on at the same time as well. And that's what I love to see in your content, because we're talking from a business perspective. And I think that is really important, and it really resonates with a lot of people too.
I think you have to. I think, let's be fair, every organisation, every business that wants to be successful is because they want to make sure their bottom line is very peachy, let's be fair. So I can't go in and work with a client and expect them to invest into something without showing them a return on investment. Now, that could be that it means that they're investing into their people and they're more productive, but it can also mean at the same time they get a benefit of having a good ROI back, and also being, I think, just earning a lot more money. Why would they not? I see so many organisations that just spend money on the wrong things because it's easier to do that. Easier to not open that can of worms than it is to actually pick it apart and think, right, we're spending a lot of money on absenteeism this year. We're spending a lot of money on staff turnover this year. Why don't we get Kirsty in and actually analyse it and think, what could we do differently and save a bit of money here? And I think people are starting to sit up and listen now. Can't ignore it, can you, really?
You can't. No, I completely agree. You can't ignore it. And if you don't have a robust wellbeing strategy that underpins your business strategy, what are you doing as a business owner? It needs to be prioritized, because when you look after your people and you invest in your people, it is an investment in your business.
Yeah, massively. And I say this all the time, a bit of a cliche one, but, people feel at their best, they perform at their best. And it's not rocket science to do that. The problem is you'll probably find that, and especially for me, I find that lots of people at the top don't want to get involved too much in it. And then that is where the culture starts. You need people leading from the top in the right way. So at the minute, that's where I am. I'm shaking things up for all the right reasons.
On your point around the impact in the organisation, what do you believe the impact is of burnout and mental health?
Oh, it's huge, and it's not getting any better, is it? I think so many people, the problem is, I find I work with a lot of organisations that are highly stressed, legal, financial, even construction. Let's be fair. People don't talk about it because they worry that one, they're going to be reprimanded, or two, it's going to impact their future job roles or performance, so they don't say nothing. And I think we're living in a world at the moment where we've got a lot of outside influences, cost of living crisis. People are just getting on with stuff that they feel was more of a priority, and kind of neglecting the impact it's having on them, where they're working so hard to manage all these things. And I think, we need to address that a lot more.
And for any leaders who are listening as part of this episode, and potentially in their environment, they don't have a culture where talking about mental health is encouraged, it's still quite a taboo topic, what would be your best piece of advice to those leaders to get that conversation going?
Firstly, you need to go and get some training.
Yeah.
I can't say this enough. And let's be real, we're humans. You only know what you know. So you can be a fantastic leader in all the right ways with your KPIs and your things that you think you should be doing as an operation, to be successful. But let's humanise things now. People are the backbone of your business. If you do not get a bit of awareness around that, and you do not understand how you can support your team, you're going to feel it in a big way. So I'm definitely moving forward. I think we talk about psychological behaviour, we talk about trauma-led sort of training now. I think you need to identify it's not just what goes on in the workplace that can have an impact, it's those outside influences as well. And being aware of that shows to your people that you actually give a, I won't say the word, but you actually give, you give
care.
A damn kind of thing.
You care. And this is also where employers do have a duty of care.
Of course they do,
to their employees. We are not expected to be medical professionals in any capacity, but there is still an element of that duty of care with how we enable our team to thrive at the same time. And I think there's been a legacy approach of what happens at home stays at home. It stops at the door. They're one and both of the same now. That blend, it is the reality of work. And I think in particular, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, with remote teams.
Yeah.
it's really hard to break away from that work life when we're, as an example, working from home, from the office. We're still consumed in that home environment and then still working. So are you noticing any shifts with mental health in work environments where they do have remote teams compared to office?
I think with remote teams, as sad as it is, a lot of people are left to their own devices. And I think we need to encourage more where you just have those check-ins. I say to people now, even if you just like with your colleagues, or it can get lonely, let's be fair. And like you said, it all comes in, morphs into one bubble where you don't really have the boundaries in place and you don't shut off at right times. Once you get isolated from people, you don't have conversations. And when you don't have conversations, that is where we start lacking in support because we're not aware of it. So I say to people now, just, book out a 10-minute slot with one of your colleagues or someone, just to have a check-in with them. Do it once a week. It's something to look forward to. It's a little bit of a break. But that way it keeps you, I think it just keeps you involved. Like, social well-being is there for a reason, guys. You know what I mean? It's meant to be there so that we interact with people. So as much as we look at all the trending things like, financial well-being and mental health, which is what I'm big on, you do have to remember that we are humans and we do crave that social interaction. So I think encouraging, your staff to keep in touch with each other, and also as a leader to make sure that you do that as well and you take that time out to, tap in with people. You don't have to just physically see them. You can just take that time out to interact with them. That's going to make a big difference to workplaces.
And if I think of my personal career history, having a manager who supported me, particularly through moments like that, has such an impact and a ripple effect.
Of course, yeah.
In everything that we do. And I completely agree. I think the first thing that any leader who is listening to this episode is investing in training.
Yeah.
And I also think have an understanding of what actually is mental health.
Oh, don't get me started on this one. And I think this is where the lack of education comes in. I teach mental health first aid. It's one of the reason why I teach this more. It's not to make any money from it, 'cause it's not a money-making thing. It's more to the point that you can train people the right way and give them awareness. Once people have that core skill there, I think you just notice things a little bit different. You're a lot more empathetic. So for one, getting sort of mental health training is going to open up some eyes. But secondly, just remembering that mental health is just how you think, feel and behave. It's exactly that. We all have it the same as whether we have physical health or mental health. We all have it. And it's how you manage it that makes a difference. That's also very different to a mental health illness or a mental health condition. And I think this is where the negative language comes around it, because there's a stigma there. And we don't talk about it enough.
Yeah, tell me a bit more about that, because I potentially see an enabler of that being social media.
Yeah.
As well. But why do you think the disconnect between mental health and a mental health condition, like why are we seeing that?
I think a lot of it is generation as well. I mean, I'm 40 now, and I'm being honest with you, when I grew up, there is that negative language where people say mental health, you think of somebody's crazy, or you think of someone's mentally unstable, they're in an institution, they're medicated. So you always just assumed it was that. We didn't talk really before about stress is poor mental health, burnout, poor mental health. If you're struggling to pay your bills and you're worrying and it's causing anxiety, that's poor mental health. Like I'd say 99% of, everyone around struggles with their mental health at one stage. The problem is we associate with different words. We don't say it's mental health, poor mental health. We say we're stressed. So even though we associate it, we don't actually combine the two. And I think no one likes to put that word next to it because it feels like there's a stigma. We need to get rid of that stigma. It's these normal conversations we should just be having. And it's really good now, because I'm noticing that a lot of the younger generation, my daughter's at school and she's 9, and they do a lot of talks around this now where they're encouraging that positive behaviour and encouraging those conversations. We didn't have that when I was younger. And I think that is one of the things that there is a generation difference. But also, like I said to you earlier, people seem to judge. And when they judge, it could be that I don't want to say anything to look like I'm failing because I might not get put up for a promotion. I might be deemed as that I can't manage. Whereas really you just need a little bit of support, and you might be overwhelmed with work, it's causing you to have burnout. It might just be that your team needs a bit more investment, things like that. So unless you're having those conversations as a leader, you're not going to be easily to identify those.
I love how you've mentioned around education there, because even from my perspective, we didn't have conversations like that. So I love to hear that your daughter is having them now, because I think us not having those conversations has had a ripple effect in the workplace where, again, we're slowly now starting to have the conversations around mental health and how looking after your mental health can be really positive for you, but also in all aspects of your life. And unfortunately, quite a lot of employers are still not doing that. They're not encouraging those types of conversations, and potentially they don't know how. But I'd love if we could talk about burnout. Mm-hmm. Burnout seems to be quite a popular word that I'm seeing online at the moment. From your perspective, what are you noticing with burnout? And from a mental health perspective, how can we overcome burnout?
Preventive measures. And this is what I say all the time. Burnout is a crisis. You've hit crisis point then. You've gone too far. Whereas if you put a lot more preventive measures in where people are aware of the triggers, they're identifying the signs that they should be looking out for, there is so much more opportunity that you could pivot that. And it's easier to bounce back from something when you're trying to prevent it. You know, it's a lot easier because you're aware of it. You can make changes. When you've hit a crisis point, it's a lot harder to come back from, which is where you will see, and you'll know this, is where you'll see long-term sick.
Yep.
It's when you're going to start seeing people off, you know, your absenteeism rates going up. You're going to see people at work being present that are not really there because their mind's not there. You know, it's elsewhere. They're not focused on the job. So it impacts us in so many different ways. But I think burnout it's a topic for me. It's always been there. I've been at burnout a few times when, to be fair, I don't think I was fully aware of it because I wasn't aware of what I'm aware of now. When I look back, how was I working through that? How was I doing that? But because I felt like I had to. It just, you just got on with it. But I would get ill every single Christmas as soon as I shut off for 2 weeks. I would burn out to the stage where I was physically unwell and couldn't move for 2 weeks. Oh, well, that's no good for me and my family.
Completely. And moments like that impact personal and professional.
Of course they do, yeah.
All in the same. And I love that you've already started to talk about it a little bit. I'd love to get a little bit deeper on the impact that burnout can have on employees and the business as a whole.
As an employee, I think it's, like I said to you, it's hard to come back from that. You have to take time out. Then you've also got to come back to work feeling like everybody's judging you or watching you and making sure you're performing okay. As a business, ridiculous, the amount of money we spend on it. And I see this from both sides. I see it from an employer's side and an employee side. Now, I'm not saying that every employer, they can't save everyone, but what you can do as a responsible employer is equip your team in the right way. Mm-hmm. Employees have accountability. They're accountable for their own mental health as well. Employers can't come in and do it for you. But if they can give you, resources and they can equip you with these tools, you've got a lot more fighting chance of, like I said, you being aware and asking people to help when you need to, asking for that support. It's not hard to do. The problem is with, I think, humans, we like to do a lot of things ourselves and not too great at delegating a lot of the time, especially as high performers, that's generally where you see it and that's generally where you see burnout. So,
and ill health shows up differently on everybody as well. And I love how you just said around asking people. And I think that is quite a gap that I see where we're trying to bring in a one size fits all, and that doesn't work.
No, of course it doesn't.
One size fits all fits absolutely nobody.
If it did, we'd be millionaires, wouldn't we? We could just sell one product and it would just cover everything. But you're right, it doesn't at all. You have to bespoke and you have to adapt things to the people in your organisation. One size is not going to fit all, but having something there that can meet different needs and be accessible, and making people feel included. It's going to be, that's where the investment needs to be at the moment.
And you have just said the most perfect word. It has to be accessible.
Yeah.
Too often there are strategies that are collecting dust on the shelf that nobody knows about because it's become too much of a tick box solution. When the reality is it should be accessible and known to everybody and baked into the strategy where it's not a nice to have, it is a business priority.
Yes, a necessity. One thing I do on my strategies, any wellbeing strategies that I do not do them as a year plan ahead because everything can change month to month. Yeah. So I do them very real time. So that means you have to touch base with your team in real time, which means that you know what's going on pretty regularly. And if you take the time out to do that, you can update your strategy pretty quickly. Then you can only invest in the things that you need to invest in rather than guessing, in a year's time, I think we should be doing this because the trends say we need to be doing that. That might not be what's in your organisation,
And what impact do you see by, rather than having a 12-month strategy, having more of a timely strategy that's more dynamic? What impact do you see?
I think you're more reactive, and what you will find is that you'll probably retain your staff a lot better. I think if your staff feel they're valued, they're heard, so if 1 month they're telling you something and within the quarter you've reacted on that, you've put things into place, for me straight away that would think, they're paying attention to what we're saying. They know we need support into these areas. You're going to get a lot more engagement from your staff, a lot more motivation, because they feel like you've taken on board what they said and you've acted on it. And that's the biggest difference, isn't it? You find that organisations, like you said, are a tick box exercise. They're not there to take the positive action. They're there to just do what they think they need to do. What a waste of money. Because what they're investing into that, the return they could get back from it if they actually done it with intention, is a big difference.
And got it right the first time round.
Yeah.
I think.
And sometimes you don't. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you've got to learn from those failures, haven't you? That's not a bad thing. But I think, like you said, if you listen from the first offset, you've got more of an opportunity to get it right first time round.
And importantly, that shows the employee that you care.
Of course. I get very passionate about that.
and the reality is we are not as progressive with this as we would like in the mental health space, and especially in the workplace. And it's really quite showing when there's statistics out there, such as from the WHO, where poor mental health is costing $1 trillion a year.
And that, and this everyone listening, is what's recorded.
Yeah.
And that's what people don't realise. That's when people put their hand up and say, this is the cause of why I'm off work, or this is the cause why I'm not performing at work. How many people do you think don't actually say that? How many people do you think actually don't admit that? And I reckon that's probably a lot higher than we anticipate. It's pretty scary when you say it like that.
So true, actually. Because if I think of just my experience, there is a lot of the time where people would be absent from work and they may not feel comfortable sharing the genuine reason why they're off.
Especially if they're working in a toxic workplace and they feel like that HR are in with the bosses and they don't feel like they can trust them, which means that they won't openly admit that. And you see that a lot, don't you? But they say 1 in 4 people at one point struggle with their mental health. I can tell you now, I reckon that's 3 to 4 people, because there's 3 of us in this room now. And if I ask 3 of us in this room how many people suffer with stress, I bet all 3 of us could put our hand up. So to me, that shows you the stats are a lot higher. I think it's just what, unfortunately, people feel comfortable with actually saying, which is really sad that we live in a world like that.
And how do you think that we could shift on that narrative where people do start to feel more confident at work for if they're not feeling themselves?
I think you've got to have them safe spaces. Create those safe spaces. And that's what creates culture, isn't it? And it does, that's your foundations. If you get that right, your team will be your biggest ambassador. So they'll go and tell everyone to come and work for you because you're a good organisation to work for. You're supported. But I think the point is, when you want people to feel comfortable, is make it a safe space to have conversations and no judgment. Non-judgmental listening goes a long way.
And ask great questions.
Yeah. And even if you don't think they're great questions, just have a bit of banter with it. Because this is what I think people have worry about mental health. It all feels quite heavy.
Yes.
And I think we forget to celebrate the positives of, positive mental health. Let's not forget that. Like I said earlier, our mental health is how we think, feel and behave. So we can have poor days, we can have some really great days. So I think we have to celebrate the positives as much as we do talk about the negatives that can come with it. And I think we probably lack that part more, which is something that I think comes with a bit of like I said to you earlier, a bit of an awareness. Once you're aware of that, you're more inclined to want to talk more positive around it.
Yeah. So as an example, if we had a listener who is struggling to get their stakeholders within the business to sign off on a wellbeing initiative because they're being faced with, it's just going to be a cost and I don't see any purpose behind it. What would be your one piece of advice for how they can position that so that their employer is seeing the benefits to the business and the employee?
Apart from coming to speak to me, you mean?
Get Kirsty in.
I think you have to look at it not just from, you have to look at it from the employer's point of view as well. And you have to, look, they are a business. Any investment they make, they do need to see a return. So do your homework.
Yep.
If it means you have to speak to a consultant who actually knows the stuff, fantastic. If it means you're getting feedback from your team so you can prove that's what's needed, fantastic. If you're noticing that your absenteeism is down to quite, people struggling with certain things at work, you can prove these things based on certain, feedback that you get. So use it wisely. But if not, start off with something smaller. So if they can't get signed off with a higher budget, okay, well, let's start off with some mental health first aid training. These are not expensive to do. We could get 10 wellbeing champions in or something. So that encourages the conversations in the office. People feel a bit more comfortable to talk about it. People are more equipped to have conversations. Start off with something like that. That's a lot cheaper than it is to have somebody come in and create a strategy and do a bit of an audit of your company. And then hopefully, move forward with some kind of program. Start with something smaller. Get that ball rolling, prove it. And then once you've proved that bit of return on investment, which I can guarantee that anybody that does a mental health first aid course will come away from that immediate guaranteed impact. So straight away they're more open. That already shows a return. Get that in, and then it's a lot easier to get the ball rolling then.
I love that. And I think the micro approach just also gets the ball rolling and shows how much of an impact you can create. You also just mentioned then around using data, which I think historically as an industry, we've not always leaned on data, and that is one of the best ways that we can make sure that we're getting a seat at the table. We've got all these analytics, we have AI, the advances in technology that are helping us to be more strategic, and we can say, hey, look, this is what's happening in the team. Here is the impact that it's creating. And if we don't do anything about it, here is what's going to happen. We now have the resources to be able to have those high-level conversations. And if we're not using those, it's really going amiss within the businesses as well.
I think you're right. I think you've got to use the tools that are there and they're going to make an impact. Why would you not? Again, I think people are a little bit scared of AI still. I think people are not, they don't see the benefits as much. I definitely see the benefits. I think there's loads there. One, that's cost effective and it's going to save you time. So if you're wondering as an organisation, how can I save money if I'm investing to this? Well, you've just saved money there. Yeah. So I think it's certain things like that. But like you said, there are certain trends. So you can monitor things that have been happening. If you've got data there, that's a big, valuable tool to have. So why would you not use that? And use that as an opportunity to invest in the right way, because you've got, like I said, you can get feedback from your teams. We know this. You can get all of the, employee engagement feedbacks that you want. But I think if you've got actual data that proves something, it's a lot easier to prove investment, isn't it?
That hard data as well, from my perspective and my experience, speaks the language to those senior stakeholders and getting that sign off at the end of the day, because money talks, right?
Of course.
And that is creating the biggest impact for them. And that way we can also make sure that we're shaping the conversation of, here is a way that we can invest in our people, because that's an investment in our business.
Yeah, of course. And how great does that look as an organisation when you're doing something with intention? And you're 100%. Not just doing it as, hi, this is what we've done this year and we're celebrating this, but next year they go very quiet and they don't continue what they're doing. Yeah. I think when you've got an organisation that's actually really putting a lot of intention behind it and they're continuing with that development, that is what is gold. It's golden, and you don't get a lot of them do that. There are some great organisations out there, don't get me wrong, but there's also a lot out there that are very failing.
And that is also what the next generation and the current are looking for in an employer as well. Someone who looks at them as more of a holistic package. Like we were just talking, our work life and home life are more or less intertwined now. And the reality is that is it, okay? So when an employer goes beyond the expected, they genuinely and authentically invest in a wellbeing strategy, the impacts are profound.
And I think, look, I can learn a lot. I'm 40 now, like I said. I see the younger generation coming through. What they want out of something is very different. It looks very different to say something like, for me when I was younger, it was more about the pay packet. they're not interested as much about that. They want to have that work-life balance. They want to have those boundaries. And there's a lot that we can take from that generation coming forward, because they realise that actually that means a lot more to them now than just getting paid. And this is where I think organisations need to adapt.
Yes.
You can't just attract talent by just putting out, this is what we're paying each year, or we're going to give you free gym pass, but they're not really going to do a lot with it. I think you need to put benefits there that are actually going to be attractive. And I think you need to put benefits in there that you're actually going to be able to retain your team with. Because that's, like I said to you, people want different things now. You do have to adapt with the times. Like we just said with AI, you've got to adapt with people wanting to have flexible working, you know?
Comes down to communication at the end of the day. If we're not talking to our people, how can we know what they want and what they need? And if we don't talk to them, we're making assumptions. And that's one of the most costly mistakes that we can make in business.
Georgia, I think if the world actually decided that to have a conversation a lot more, we'd be in such a better place. A conversation can open up so many doors. And I don't know why like I said to you, as us humans, I don't know why we avoid it so much. People feel uncomfortable. That's probably because they don't know how to deal with something. And again, that comes down to education. If you know how to deal with something, I'm not saying easy, but easier, you've got an opportunity to signpost people to somewhere. You're not expected to solve people's problems. They don't even know how to solve them themselves. What they're asking for is support.
Yes.
So surely investing into the right support is going to be the best way to go.
And by avoiding those conversations, we're not building those skills for ourselves as leaders to be able to have them. We learn by having difficult conversations.
Yeah.
And those conversations can be hard. They really can. But the more and more that we have them, we can get better at ensuring the team member is supported, the team member is heard, and we can signpost where effectively.
Plus you get very resilient, I promise you.
You do.
And this is one of the biggest things. I think resilience in any leader is never a bad thing. You're going to get hit with some feedback that you're probably not going to want to get hit with. However, what you've got then is an opportunity to make them changes.
Yeah.
I'd rather be a leader that has an opportunity to make changes than be one that's in the dark and not wondering why my team are leaving me and spending 30 grand every time to replace them.
And what a great point for us to bring it all together on. And I just know from the people who will be listening, there is so many amazing takeaways. I'm going to wrap up with one last question, if that's okay. So looking back, what is one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self? Definitely
ask for support when you need it.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely ask for support, and don't feel that you're going to be judged, because everyone goes through their own stuff, let me tell you, whether they like to admit it or not. And I think sometimes you being the first person to actually start a conversation can really help and inspire others to do the same.
I am obsessed with that. I love that. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome.
Today.
Thank you very much for having me.
And we need to keep going on this conversation because more and more people need to talk about mental health.
We do indeed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.